Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dusty Wheel. I'm your host, the Innkeeper, and you've joined us for another episode of our live call-in talk show all about the Wheel of Time. And today, I almost said tonight, but today you've joined us for a special episode on Sunday where we like to interview a variety of content creators that are talking, doing podcasts, maybe even doing other YouTube channels, maybe even creating some art. But today we happen to have a podcast, or a showcast, as they like to call it. Talker on Riyadh is here with us. So why don't we just jump right in and bring them onto the show? Hey, welcome you three, Joe, Tom, and Jen. How you doing today?
Good. How are you, Matt?
Good. I'm so glad to have you guys here. I appreciate you making the time on a Sunday afternoon to come talk about the Wheel of Time. Why don't we just jump into it? I think I told you this once, when I first, listened to your podcast, it had a lot to do with the fact that your name of your podcast was very close to Teleron Riyadh. And everyone that has watched the show or that knows me in Wheel of Time knows that I just can't get enough of the metaphysics, and I love talking about Teleron Riyadh. And I think, in fact, I sent you guys some tweets about, you had an episode about Teleron Riyadh, and I was like, shoot, they're talking about Teleron Riyadh. I want to talk about this. And so I had mentioned it, and I started following you, and I saw you in some of the shows, and I've loved what you've done with the podcast. So before I ask you podcast questions about even the content you've been creating, tell me how this trio came to be. Like, did you guys all know each other growing up, Tom, or was this something in adulthood where you met and you put this together?
Well, we all met in college, so I guess that depends on your point of view whether you call it adulthood or not.
Gotcha.
I certainly wouldn't, but yeah. So we all met back in college. Jen and I did theater there. Joe was tangentially related to that. Joe's more of music than someone who would be on stage. And Joe got us into the books through osmosis. Joe got me into the books. I introduced him to Jen, and we've all been fans for years.
Is this how you remember it, Jen? Is that exactly how it happened?
Yeah, we all went to school together. We did theater, and then Tom left out that we all played D&D together as well.
That's right.
Nice.
And that was really how I became closer friends with Joe, I think. And then Joe came into the theater thing later. But yeah, I'd say that's how we all became.
Did the Wheel of Time ever make its way into campaigns that you guys would do? I mean,
Oh,
Yes,
yes.
definitely.
So behind me on that shelf there, I have the D20 system Wheel of Time handbook.
Great.
So I did put that in it. Jen, I believe you were an Aes Sedai in one of the quests.
I was?
Yeah, I think
You were?
so.
God. Oh, I was
were?
going to say that you had a cat named Asmodean in one of them. I remember that.
That's also true.
That was before I
Nice.
read it, but I remember that you had
many
a cat.
characters named after characters from the Wheel of Time,
I
for
don't
sure.
remember being a nice cat at all.
well, how immersed are, when it comes to reading the books? Do you have different levels here? Have you read them 3 times, 4 times, 20 times? Like, what is your your kind of hardcore fan freak nature when it comes to Wheel of Time for you, Joe?
So I've read the entire series twice, but I've read the first like 6 or 7 books probably like 6 or 7 times, because I would always start to do rereads and then I would never make it through the whole series.
Yeah.
So I would stop at like book 5 or 6 or something like that. So, but I've read all the way to the end twice, and I'm actually obviously doing a reread now. So
Yeah,
I'll make it through.
that reminds me. I did the same. I mean, I think when it first came out, I was pretty young, and I remember reading the first, I want to say 6 or 7, just so many times. And I can't say that I've read the rest that many times. That tends to be mine. Tom, same for you. Are you along that lines? Read it a couple times all the way through, but kind of read a lot at the beginning?
Yeah, not as much, because I started reading them. I started reading them as Winter's Heart came out, so I didn't have that much time to wait for the latter books. So I'd done 3 full rereads. I'm on my 4th full reread now, and then I've reread individual books for particular reasons. Probably maybe 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
Like I've reread individual ones. So yeah, around the same level as Joe.
Oh, as far as favorite books, then, Jen, like, what's of all the books, do you have kind of a top 3?
I've only read them once. I'm on my first
Okay.
reread right now.
Awesome.
I really love the last book. I remember the last book was just awesome. The first book is really good too, and I don't know about any of. I'm trying to think of storylines like that I really like. I like Matt, so anything without Matt, I probably don't like.
Yeah, it starts getting. You're right. You start forgetting which stories happen in what books too.
I think I like the third book too, like when he goes into the stone and
the
Aiel, like I like all that.
No, I like that.
Avienda too, but yeah, I like all that.
There's a part of it, I think, of being able to appreciate the books as you go back through them like that. Especially, you've read it through all the way once, and you're going through a second time. It's a lot of fun because you're almost like rediscovering a lot of things that I think I've become a little bit, not callous isn't the right word, but it's just like, okay, yeah. You got to the eye. Okay, yeah, great. Now can we get to Falmouth? Okay, great. Can we? It's always like this. I want to get certain places in the book, and I think I kind of just like I want to fast forward a lot of pieces. One time I put together, I wanted to see how much text was involved, and I put together just Nynaeve's point of views in kind of book format, and it makes up like I think it was like 300 pages. And I just wanted to know, like, what are we talking about? If you try to pull out point of views, chapters, like how much would it be? Yeah. So if you've ever been curious, Nynaeve makes up like in that 200 to 400 page range of point of views, which is
wow.
That doesn't seem like a lot.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, but maybe, you think about how many characters there are. I don't know. I mean, it did surprise me that she had as much, I guess. And I don't know what the typeface settings were. I don't know. Like, I don't know exactly what that actually, would compare to a book page, the pages that I kind of created. But yeah, it's interesting to start taking different looks at the book as you go through. But it seems like you each have kind of differing or varying, I should say, amounts of experience in the books. How's that come to play in your podcast as far as, talking about the books? I've listened to a variety of them, and as you're going through them, I don't know, I've liked to hear kind of like Jen's views often of like, well, I'm looking at it this way, as almost kind of only going through the books once, and then you'll come back and kind of talk about, well, there's this experience. Don't forget this. Have you liked having varying levels of experience on the show, Tom?
Yeah, I think it makes for engaging listening. That there's, I guess, different levels of, I don't want to say expertise, but different levels of like, I guess, immersement in the books.
Yeah.
So that people who are more casual fans, or people who are maybe reading the books anew and don't care about spoilers, because we are a spoiler podcast, all have something they kind of attach to. And I think that it's not just an interplay of personalities, but it's an interplay of like kind of points of view in discussing the book. I do think that makes it engaging. At least I hope it does.
Yeah, it has for me. I've really enjoyed that part. How did this come about, Joe? Like, why did you decide to do a podcast?
All right. So about years ago, a friend of mine got me into podcasts. Like, I never really listened to them until maybe like 3 years ago. And he recommended a bunch of different podcasts to me, and I was looking for something new. So I actually wound up just searching on Spotify for like Wheel of Time, and there's actually the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast popped up. So I started listening to that, and I was like, oh man, this sounds like so much fun. They're having so much fun. I was like, I want to do a Wheel of Time podcast. And then the thought was like, there's a lot of reread podcasts out there already.
Yeah.
And there are so many good ones too. It was just like, I don't want to do another reread podcast. And, when we heard that the show was coming out, like when we got, I think it was around the time Rosamund was cast, when we knew like definitively this was something that was happening. I was like, oh, we got to do a podcast about the show. There's not really any podcasts talking about that yet. So that could be our little space. And then I kind of asked the two, Tom, and it's funny. I always hear a lot of people say that they don't know anybody who's read the Wheel of Time. They don't have people to talk to about it. Where we're like the opposite. We have like 7 or 8 friends who've all read the series.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it was like, I was thinking like, all right, who should I ask to be in the podcast?
Do any of your friends now feel like left out? Or are they like, why didn't you choose me?
I haven't heard anything. We actually we recorded an episode on Friday, and our friend Rob, who's on Audio Dungeon with Tom, was on it. We had him on it. He was the guy who got me into the Wheel of Time. So,
funny.
Yeah. So we had him on it. He's actually had a really good time and was excited about it. So, But no, nobody's actually said that to me yet.
Well, maybe if they listen to this now, they'll ask that question.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, I mean, it sounds like you've done podcasts before. I mean, you're doing one, Audio Dungeon. What's the Audio Dungeon podcast about?
So that's actually it's a live homebrew Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition show. We do it live. Unfortunately, it's Wednesday nights at 8:30. So,
I see.
Eastern Standard Time. So that's
Right.
But so I don't want to plug it too hard. But we what's it called? We go live on Facebook, on YouTube, and Twitch, and it's our own like modified 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons quest where it's fun, it's entertaining, and it's video. It's not just a podcast. It's audio, and there's a lot of video effects, sound effects that we put into it. So it's pretty high production value compared to some of the other stuff that you see out there. Awesome. And again, it's me, Rob, that we talked about, who'll be a guest, and a few of our friends. We do that every Wednesday. So that is a lot of fun. It's a lot. It allows us to, I guess, flex our creative muscles that we haven't necessarily flexed since our college days. On a regular basis.
No, it sounds fun, and of course you can always catch either of these on repeat, on repeat afterwards. Right. So I need to go check it out. I've seen it show up on Twitter a couple times now. I think you guys have mentioned it on your Twitter account, and I've told myself I need to go watch that. Now there's so many, like you said, there's so many Wheel of Time podcasts, content creators. Like it's interesting trying to keep up with that while creating your own content. Is this your first podcast, Jen, that you've been part of?
Yeah, definitely. I don't even listen to any of them.
Oh, really?
I never did. Now I feel like I don't even have time to read the book by the time so I don't want to focus on anything other than reading. I started reading it again when we did this, said I better like read them again. And so I'm trying to focus on doing that. But yeah. This is first and only podcast for me.
How has this affected family? Like, are your significant others excited about this? Do they enjoy this new aspect of your lives? I guess, Tom, you've already been doing some of this, but Jen, this sounds new to you. Is this like has it become a family thing, or is this kind of like just a geeky thing you do in the basement? And
no. My husband's actually on Audio Dungeon with Tom.
Oh, okay.
So,
it's a little tit for tat there.
He does voice acting, so he built this booth that I'm sitting in our house.
Oh, awesome.
I'm able to do the podcast from here. So yeah, we do it at night after the kids are in bed, so it doesn't really affect anything.
Okay, no, that's awesome. Joe, is it the same thing? Do you have like familial support when it comes to your podcasting, or is this something new for your family?
Yeah, it's new. Well, it's new, and they're supportive. I do a lot of the editing too for the podcasting, which seems to take up more time than anything else. So the actual recording part is easy, and that doesn't take up much time. So
yeah.
So.
I think the same. I think my family would say the same thing. Like the actual show doesn't take up a lot of time. It's just it's them seeing me sit in the corner, kind of like, oh, he's preparing again. Thursdays are my favorite days. I don't know if Thursdays are my favorite days because we do the show on Wednesdays. It's like I have like a moment the next day where I feel like I can breathe, nothing is required, and then it's like somehow Friday and Saturday comes along. It's like, oh, I should probably prepare for the next one. But yeah, Thursdays are awesome for that.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we jump into kind of what you guys have been doing? It's the Showcast of Amazon on Prime. Like, as a fan, obviously all of us are excited. I'm doing some live call-in talk show. Obviously, I'm excited about this. What are your hopes, Tom, for the first season of Amazon on Prime? Like, when it comes to what do you want this first season to accomplish?
I guess, without getting too specific, I want it to be high quality, and I want it to be that fans of the books want to see the second season. Like, it'll be great if like it's hugely successful and like the general populace wants to see a second season, but it'll be even better if we want to see a second season based on what the first season provides. You know? Yeah. So I mean that's very, very general. We've talked sometimes, I guess, ad nauseum on our show about like our worries about what they may do to like condense or like how much content they're going to put into season one. Are they going to rush things? Are they going to speed things up? Are they going to cut too many, characters or storylines, etc.? And I'll say this: everything that I've seen so far about the production of the show has made me fairly confident that they are putting care and effort into this. This doesn't seem to be a cash grab or
right.
like, oh, let's just try and make a knockoff of Game of Thrones and see if we can get people. But it seems like they're actually putting, they're actually taking the time to get high quality cast members, production members, and putting a lot of effort into making this something that's worthwhile. So I just hope that translates to the screen.
Yeah, you brought up an interesting point about, okay, so they may or may not be cutting certain characters. We've all kind of been talking about this last couple of months. Like, what are all the signs, that we're getting from production mean? Does it matter to you three? Does it, maybe start Joe? Does it matter if we don't like it as the core, maybe fans that grew up in the books, more so that we get a second season because maybe all of the world loves it? Like, is it more important that the world loves it and we get 10 seasons, or is it more important that it was like something that all of the people that, read the books love, but we maybe miss out on, season 2?
Oh, so that's a good one. I think I want it. I think I'd want it to be something that the whole world loves, and it winds up going the full 10 seasons, even if it's not exactly the way I pictured it was going to turn out. I think just for that matter, that it would go on for that long and that so many people embrace it. And I was saying this the other day, I found a tweet online where somebody was tweeting about the Wheel of Time, but not because they knew what it was. They saw, Daniel Henney's going to be in a new show called Wheel of Time on Amazon. I'm totally going to watch that.
Yeah.
Just to draw in all of those people who have no idea what the Wheel of Time is and kind of open it up to a whole new audience of people. That's what I'm kind of really excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. Jen, do you feel the same way? Like, whatever they change, whatever they do, would you rather just see the Wheel of Time be completed in TV series, or does it actually matter kind of how they get there?
I definitely agree with Joe. I think I'd rather see it last. I'd like to see the general audience like it. I hope they don't change too much. I hope, but we also have to understand it's going to be different. And if it's a good show, on its own merits, I think we have to just accept that and not be like, wait a minute, where's this person? They changed this, they didn't go here, and there's going to be a lot of that. But I think we have to just watch it as a separate entity from the books.
Yeah.
That's been the difficulty. I mean, those that are watching in chat, I see some chat going on. I'm kind of curious. More important that they adhere to kind of what you want for the show, or more important that we get every season all the way to the end? Tom, do you feel the same way, or are you somewhere in between?
I'll say this. I want the show to be successful, and I want to see a full adaptation. So I do agree with Joe and Jen as far as that goes. But if you told me, Tom, there's going to be 10 seasons of this show, and they're going to be successful financially, and they're going to have wide critical acclaim, but you're going to know the adaptation is awful. that they changed the point of it, and the end is completely different because the philosophy of the show is different than the books, and not minor changes but major changes. I don't know if I would secretly take that deal just so that other people like it. I mean, on a much smaller scale, Joe and I are big fans of Lord of the Rings. I've read the books multiple times before the movies were ever created. And I'm just going to say this, right? So we saw the first book, The Fellowship of the Ring, loved it. Saw The Two Towers, really liked a lot of parts of that. When the Return of the King came out, we went to see a marathon of the 3 movies. And in the part of The Two Towers, the film, where Haldir gets killed at Helm's Deep, the elf gets killed, Joe stood up and applauded. And I also applauded. Because the elves don't come to Helm's Deep in the books, and that's the point. I don't want to get too much into to the degree of that, but the point of the books is that the elves are leaving, and it's the time of men and whatever. And the movies just didn't understand that, I felt. And that was small scale. And overall, I think those movies are terrific. I've seen them all a bunch of times. But
yeah,
I think that if the show makes too many changes like that, I want to make something cool as opposed to something that is what the philosophy of the books are. If the show says, I don't really care about men and women working together, or the perils of lack of communication, or the fact that shadow is really just the absence of light, and that that there's like, like there's a battle for goodness, but goodness is within all of us or whatever, and says like, no, we want more explosions. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna really feel happy at the end of it, even though I'll watch like every episode. Like,
right. I think there's almost like a tacit agreement here between us all, I think, which is, as much as we're going to loathe maybe those moments that they don't maybe catch on to something or they do something that we don't like, we're probably going to watch the show like every episode. And just so we can have really good reasons why we didn't like it. But we're not going to like, is there anything that they could do? I mean, I want to get back to actually something you're saying here, but this brings up this question here. Is there anything they could do, Jen, that would make you not watch the show?
I don't think so.
What if they cut me in, Jen?
I would not watch it. I'd be sad. But how could you not watch it? We've been like waiting for this for so many years, like thinking, oh, what if they did a Wheel of Time show? And like, how could you not watch it? I don't know. I don't think so. I can't think of anything.
You, Joe, is there anything they could do?
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of stuff they could do. I mean, but it's probably borderline ridiculous.
Nothing you've heard, like no rumors that have come out that would make you at this point.
All right. So are you leading to the whole rumor about Perrin?
We can go there. We
want to go there. Let's go there.
I'd still watch it.
Yeah. So the rumor about Perrin being married and, at the beginning of the show, and he accidentally kills his wife.
Right.
I think that's totally ridiculous, but it wouldn't stop me from watching the show. I'd just probably yell a lot at the TV and, rant on the podcast, but that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's going to happen is, honestly, no matter what, right? Like, for example, I really care about the metaphysics. So when they break the metaphysics, or if they do, I don't want to say they're going to, but if they break the metaphysics, there's going to be part of me that's just going to be like, man, that was a key. But because I feel that it makes up a key theme and key kind of meaning to the story overall. And I think that's when Tom, you're bringing all those things up, I want to tackle that a little bit. Like thematically, what are maybe the core kind of themes that you want to see them tackle in this first season? In other words, what are you hoping that they capture about the spirit of, let's say, book 1 and some of 2 or book 1 and 2? What are you hoping that they capture? Whatever they change, or whatever, Perrin's married, maybe not, who cares? What do you want them to capture as far as the spirit of the show goes, Tom?
I guess, for first season show, I don't want them, I don't need them to get too complex into everything that I think the series touches on. I would say I want to make sure the gender dynamics and how they're kind of established and investigated even in the beginning. I want to make sure that that's done. And I think, I think them casting Rosamund Pike and kind of having her be the anchor of the first season says that they're going to kind of do that, at least in the terms of their casting and how they're pursuing that. So I would say that, and to me, like I hope that they hit pretty quickly on the fact that, like, when you don't communicate effectively with people, that's when bad things happen. Because I mean, like, it's a, whatever. I guess it's an in your face thing, but it's also, I think, more of a kind of a running commentary that, like, every time somebody chooses to not communicate something that they could communicate, that's when things get more complicated and things kind of go off the rails. And it, that pays off when people actually do sit down and talk to each other about how things are going. So I kind of hope that they at least, play into that, like, Maureen doesn't communicate with the boys, and yes, that's intentional, and yes, she has good reasons for that, but that will feed into their distrust of her later on. Or, like, every time, Rand can't talk to Egwene about how he feels, or she can't talk to him about how she feels, and that plays in later on. So I hope that they kind of hit on those things in the first season, at least in regards to themes. I would say communication and like the gender dynamics and how they're different from the world of the fantasy worlds that we're used to.
Yeah, absolutely. I like both of those. Joe, is there anything else you would add on top of that as far as, like, thematically what you want to see tackled, whatever they change? What's the theme of that would keep it kind of maybe core to the Wheel of Time?
So I think one of the ultimate themes, and this is probably not going to be something early on, but at the end of the series, when Rand's fighting the Dark One at Shale Ghul, the whole theme, and it comes to light, is like, you can't kill evil. It's all about choice. So I think choice is like a big important thing that they're going to have to work in there, and it's a little tougher in the beginning. Definitely what Tom said about the gender dynamics, right? I hope they mention at least in the beginning when they're talking about the Age of Legends, about how the greatest things of the power were done with both men and women together, working together. And I think I'm just looking for, like, usually in the first season of something like this, I'm just looking for some world building, that they do a good job of that. So I'm hoping that they do that. I would definitely like to see some Tel'aran'rhiod, and I'm hoping they don't cut that out. But also the arcs of the characters. So there's like certain things and I don't know how they're approaching this, the writers, but there are certain things that each character needs to go through to become who they are. Like Egwene being captured by the Seanchan is like a huge thing. Perrin, what in the first book, went his encounter with the White Cloaks and killing the White Cloaks. Rand and I guess Rand's a little bit later
1 second.
on, but
we should tell everybody. This is, I mean, I would imagine if you're talking with us, this is a spoiler kind of show. No, I was going to say it later, but you just reminded me there as I heard my production crew kind of giggle a little bit when you said when you said something about when you said Perrin and you started talking about Egwene. Absolutely. Yeah. There's going to be some spoilers here. There may be we might get on some things that happen at the very end of the books. So just know, if you really don't want anything spoiled, at this point, then just go check out Tel'aran'rhiod after this. No, I'm just kidding. You can't. You can follow them, but if you follow, I can tell you this from listening to their first episodes. They are a spoiler podcast. And,
yes, a spoiler podcast.
And you are going to, within the first episode, know some key things that happen, which is the same thing with this show. Like, in the end, we talk about the books, and you're just going to have things spoiled. So definitely a spoiler podcast, but if you haven't read the books or want anything spoiled, then follow up with us after you've read them. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt each other there, but yeah.
No, that's...
Absolutely, there's some key character arcs that we want them to get right.
Yeah.
Now, they may not get all of them right. Jen, is there one in particular that you're like, if they screw up this character arc, then it's like ruined for me? Is there someone in particular you want them to get right that matters to you?
I'm going back to the Perrin thing. Like, I just think that him having a wife and killing her at the beginning is like changing a lot about his character, like immensely.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I know like he's gonna go into like a rage later on with the White Cloaks, like Joe just said, but I feel like that has to come like a little later in the story, not before they even leave. I feel like everybody leaving Emond's Field should be kind of like an innocent, kind of like, they're not young, too young, but they're basically kids who haven't been ever outside of their own village, and nothing really bad I don't think has ever happened to any of them. They've kind of been sheltered. And I just think that happening is just a huge change, too big of a change for his character.
Yeah, no, and that's. I think I want to follow up on that. By the way, this is a live call-in talk show as we're talking with Tel'aran'rhiod about the Wheel of Time. If you did want to give us a call and ask them a question, ask one of us a question, or if something we've said as far as talking about the themes of the show that you want to make sure they cover, maybe certain character arcs that you're hoping they get to, or if it would affect you if they change something, if you just would not be able to watch after that. We're kind of curious. So if you want to give us a call, feel free. You don't have to, but we'd love to have you give us a call. That question about Perrin, maybe let's dig into that a little bit. I feel like it would change our initial kind of read of Perrin, but I wonder if it's going to change. That would change too much of what eventually happens with him. As far as we know, a little bit later, he does kill, right? And he's not happy with that, right? It's you might say it was accidental, right? In the same way, I kind of wonder if this is true. Not that I believe this rumor, but for me at least, it's like it would add a little bit of a dimension of kind of this. He's more in his head. He's much more careful around people, even more so than maybe he ever was. In other words, it could, I'm trying to get the positive spin on it, it could explain some of the nuances of Perrin's character in a way that just gets the viewer right into it, right? if they're not, they haven't read the books a lot, they haven't kind of bought into Perrin in this way, and he's just kind of a unique little teenager, but it potentially could kind of jumpstart people into feeling or thinking about Perrin like, oh, I get it. I immediately understand where he's at because this is such a difficult thing for him because this axe or whatever, death, and he doesn't feel comfortable in his skin in this way, doing the things people want him to do. So I don't know. I'm trying to, as I heard about this thing, I was trying to kind of spin this, like, how could I still kind of from a character arc buy into Perrin? Tom, do you still have a problem? I mean, do you have the same kind of similar problem with this? If they start off Perrin's role this way, do you feel like it would just kind of ruin his character arc, complement it, or not really do either?
Well, I'll say this. I was trying to think positively about it because I didn't think it was necessarily the best choice to make, but I do agree. I think it's kind of a shortcut into the conflicts that he has later on in the book, kind of setting them up right away. He has this inner, like, animalistic side that he's constantly fighting against, that he's afraid to let go, and so that's like, instead of having tons of internal monologue, which I don't know how they're going to deal with as the books progress, like, okay, people know from the get-go he's fighting with this, and this is why he's afraid. It's not just like, oh, he's got cool wolf abilities, why doesn't he want to use them? It's
right.
Because he's afraid if he does, he might hurt somebody that he cares about. Yeah. My biggest concern with it is more from Jen's point of view. It ages him, and it turns him, instead of somebody who's young and possibly relatable to the largest population of people, he's already married. He's already an old man. Doesn't matter what age he's at,
right.
And whatever. Like 10 plus years ago, in comic books, they did away with Spider-Man's marriage, and they did this whole bad storyline where he had to deal with the devil, and his marriage disappeared because the comic book writers said, like, we have a Spider-Man who's married, and he's been married for like 15 years, and he's a grown-up, and like Spider-Man should be a teenager or like a teenager. And so they did that because they felt like they were writing storylines that couldn't relate to the audience they wanted to relate to. And I'm afraid that that's going to happen for Perrin too. And the other fear I have, especially if they're going to be doing, let's say, the first 3 books in 2 seasons, is that Perrin's going to start off the first season with a love of his life that he's married to, and end the second season with the love of his life that he's soon going to be married to. And people are going to be like, oh, he's a cad. Like, and I don't want that to happen either, because Perrin should be the most emotionally relatable person, I think. Like, not no one, but very few people are as cool as Matt is, at least on the surface. And hopefully people aren't going through what Rand goes through. But Perrin, like, everyone kind of struggles with, like, anger or dark feelings that they have, or marital troubles, or like just relating to your spouse or the person you care about. Like, those are things that are relatable. Obviously not the level that Perrin deals with them, perhaps, but like, we shouldn't be like, oh, we've all killed a spouse before. We know what that's like. I'm worried. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. This is fantasy, Tom. So let me before I get your opinion on that, let me bring in our first caller it's Andrew. Let me bring him in. 1 second. Hey, Andrew, welcome
Hello.
to the Dusty Wheel. How you doing?
Yeah. Thanks. Pretty good. I guess my question is to you and the panelists: how do you view how Robert Jordan wrote The World of Dreams to how Brandon wrote it in the scenes, and how he sort of, because the way I look at it is Brandon, Rob Jordan did one thing, and Brandon took it to the next logical extension, specifically the fight with Perrin and Slayer, and the difference in the last 2 books. So I just wanted to know what your thoughts were. And then to piggyback on the last topic about the last topic before you address that, I could live with Perrin killing his wife if it was one of 2 situations. One is if it was a manifestation of his wolf powers beforehand, like if they wanted to bring it in earlier, or 2 is he did it as a way to end her suffering. Maybe she was really badly hurt, almost mortal injury she was suffering, so he killed her in the same way he thought about possibly killing Egwene, if necessary, with the ravens. Those are the only 2 ways I could buy that.
That's interesting. Yeah. So to the three of you, maybe Joe, let's jump. Let's stay with Perrin for a moment here, which is
we're talking a lot about Perrin.
I know, right? Do you need? I mean, as far as what the caller Andrew's brought up, this idea that maybe we get some of the wolf side earlier. Would that enhance this storyline aspect? This rumor, again, we're having fun with this rumor, but would that make this kind of more in line with kind of what you think his character arc is, or does that ruin it even further for you?
I don't think you need to introduce it right away. You're learning a lot in the beginning, especially if this is going to be like a first episode. If we're going to expect like Winter Night to happen in the first episode, you're meeting like 8-9 characters who are all important characters already. You're being introduced to a whole new world, and throwing something like that in there, like a manifestation before we even know anything about Rand, who obviously is the main character more so. I don't think you need to do it right there. I mean, Matt doesn't really get into his powers, so to speak, his Tavaran abilities and whatnot until the third book. Yeah. So I think it's good the way it was paced in the beginning. I think they should hold it off. But yeah, I don't know. Again, this is a rumor, so
yeah, it's fun. I think. Well, in light of the fact that we're talking kind of character arcs, and this idea of, what as readers that we would be okay with, right? In the end of the day, it's the character that we care about most, right? It's the arc that Jordan was painting, whether or not this character, everything happens exactly the same. So, and that's really where this kind of, whoever started this rumor, the interesting part about it is to just kind of see what we all think about Perrin. This has kind of forced everyone to say, well, wait, does this go with Perrin or not? Does this fit or does this not fit? And I like that it started that conversation, if you will. Andrew, as far as the Tel'aran'rhiod, you brought this up, and then we'll let you go here, but I want to ask you a question. As far as you said Sanderson, how he did it versus Robert Jordan did it, do you think that if Robert Jordan had written the last 3 books that we would have seen similar things happen in Tel'aran'rhiod, or do you believe that Sanderson actually innovated well beyond what Jordan intended?
I think what Brandon did is he took what he would have projected as how, based on the physics of the world at the time, of the dream world, how things could progress from the battle between Perrin and Slayer. Because I see a lot of, I don't know if you guys have read his Cosmere book, and specifically the Stormlight Archives, but I see a lot of similarities between certain characters in that, and I'll just leave it at that, how they are able to hold themselves without giving any spoilers on that. But I think that was one of the things that it fit within the time. I don't think it was out of left field necessarily. I just don't think that the specific battles and what Perrin, sort of the matrixy nature of the battles, I don't see Robert Jordan doing that.
Okay.
Now, are you going to tell me at the end? I could see at the end, in the World of Dreams, Perrin ultimately kills Slayer. That I can see. It's just how the matrixy aspect of it is what I didn't think.
Yeah, so, I agree with Andrew.
Yeah. So I'm gonna drop you off here, Andrew. But I appreciate you calling in. We're gonna keep on this topic of Tel'aran'rhiod. Thank you for being a caller and for a viewer, and really appreciate you. And hopefully we'll see you next week. Nice to see you, man. Bye.
Bye, Andrew.
Yeah, so Tel'aran'rhiod is an interesting one. I when it comes to this, I'm kind of curious, Jen, because you've been through the books once. You really liked the last book. Do you feel like you noticed much of a distinct difference between like Robert Jordan and Brandon, like as far as maybe Tel'aran'rhiod's concerned? Or I mean, was the difference really stark for you reading through the books?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't really recall it being like a jolt when I went into the last books, but I think it was. I mean, it was slight. You could tell it was like slightly different, but I don't think it was like really that noticeable. I think he did a good job of continuing Robert Jordan's work.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think maybe it stands out when maybe you've read some of us were we're just obsessed about it for so long that like we see these certain nuances and it's like, oh, I think I see Brandon, but even Brandon's pointed out to a lot of people is like, well, actually that thing that you're talking about was actually something that Jordan did. In other words, it's it's really interesting to try to kind of detect it. I think the arc of Tel'aran'rhiod was going the place that Brandon did. Whether or not, I have no idea if what Jordan intended or didn't for Teleron, but it all feels like it fits within the things that Jordan was building. So it doesn't. That one didn't. I wasn't caught off guard by Teleron as maybe some other things. That felt like it fit, at least for me. Let's bring in Lancer. He's been kind of waiting for us. Let's bring him in a call and see what he has to say. Hey, Norm, as we like to say, or Norm, I should say it louder. Norm. How you doing, man?
What's up, you guys? Good afternoon, and good afternoon to everybody in chat. Hello, hello.
Hello.
So what question do you have for our guest here?
So I got a couple of things for everybody. I always ask the panelists, any guest panelists, my famous question: what do you guys fear the most when you see the Wheel of Time TV show coming on? What's your biggest fear for the show that you have? Because for me, it's if they either one get rid of characters or combine characters for no apparent reason. Like for instance, you guys were talking about in Lord of the Rings, how Tom Bombadil is just not in the movies at all. Mm-hmm. Or in Game of Thrones, you didn't have Lady Stoneheart, and then those of us who read the books, that was a very interesting arc, and it's now dead and gone. So if, like in Wheel of Time, a lot of people are saying, just get rid of Morgase's arc altogether, because in the end, it doesn't really do anything for the story for Rand or Matt or Perrin or even Egwene and Nynaeve and company. It doesn't do anything for it, so why even include it altogether? So, I'm talking about that type of thing. Or are they just going to combine Min and Elaine, God forbid? Something like that. That's my fear, that they're going to do something so irate or inane like that. It's just like, why? You're taking out the tapestry, you're taking out the colors. So
this is a good topic. Fear. I think this is a good topic for the whole panel, and I think we'll move into this the nightmare scenario aspect, which is fun. Sure. Hey, Lancer, thank you very much for calling in, man. We'll have the entire panel cover that question. I really appreciate that idea itself. But before I do let you go, is there anything that they could do where you wouldn't watch an episode?
Well, okay. If they take out something like, if they just make channeling so cheesy to the point where it's like, abracadabra with my finger, or something so cheesy that it's just like some dumb split screen, or traveling is like something on like some pixel or something. I mean, it's just bad CG.
Oh my gosh.
That would kill me. That would truly kill me.
Oh my gosh, you might have come up with the one thing. Okay, hey Lancer, thank you. Thank you so much for calling in, man. I really appreciate it. Hey, we'll talk to you soon.
That is the one thing I was going to say.
I'm here all week, guys. Thanks a lot.
Okay, that is a killer. I don't know, man.
That is my one thing, is channeling. If they do a bad job on the channeling, that could really ruin the show for me. Definitely. No one's been talking about this at all. Yeah. I think we covered it in like our second episode. We should probably revisit it. But if they don't do it right, I think it's going to really ruin it for, at least for the book readers. For the non-book readers, they might not, they might not care or have anything to compare it to. But yeah, I think that could totally ruin the show for me.
Tom, is there a ruin moment for you? As far as like the CG thing, CGI thing, is it would that kill it for you?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that I'm gonna have to worry about it. Again, a lot of Let's to your fear. A lot of what we've been looking at in regards to like the team that they've assembled on the production side leads me to think, and I don't know what budget numbers are, and even if I did know what budget numbers are, I wouldn't know how that money is being spent. But it leads me to think that it's not going to look chintzy. But if it looks chintzy, that's going to be a hard sell for me to stick around. Yeah. If I'm watching it every week and it looks like a Stephen King miniseries from the mid-90s, hey, those were great.
They were
plot-wise, but like, they did not look good when the special effects came
the
into
hand
play.
of God coming down, crushing the nuke from the stands.
Right. The Langoliers were just like cartoon little, Pac-Men. But if it looks like that, it's going to be hard to stick around. But I don't think it will, guys. That's not my worry.
Yeah. I agree with that. I'd be shocked. It would just be shocking at this point for Amazon to pick this up if they didn't have just extreme confidence that that's something they could tackle easily. Like, that seems like hopefully the easier part. I mean, shows have messed it up. Don't get me wrong. There have been I've hated it even in shows where I thought had a great production budget. But I have a hard time believing that they can screw that piece up. Jen, is there something that, if they drop, I heard in the show, if they drop Min, are you out? Or is there...
I'm not out.
You're not out?
I was just going to say, I know it's going to be hard for them to do the 3 love interests. It's going to be weird and difficult for them to do it.
Yeah.
But I hope they keep that, because I feel like they each really are like a different side of him.
Yeah. And
they give different things to him. I personally like Min the best, but they're all,
of course,
I think they're all important for him. And I know, like, it's just going to be hard to accept that this main character has 3 love interests, but I hope I wouldn't not watch it, but I really hope they keep it in. And that guy before said combining Elaine and Min, that would be the worst.
Oh, that'd be the worst.
Those are so far, not even close to each other.
That might kill it for you, though,
sad.
right?
Yeah, I don't want to
merging Elaine and Min. Yeah.
No,
that was bad. Hey, let's bring Beth into the call 1 second. Hey, Beth, welcome to the Dusty Wheel. How you doing?
Thank you. Good to be back.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. So, what topic has kicked it off for you? What are you interested in talking to our guests about?
Well, I just had a thought on the whole Perrin being married thing.
Okay.
I don't necessarily buy into it, but I can see that they might do that to use it as a way to show how Perrin always seems to feel responsible for everything bad that happens if he happens to be there. If he, say, had a fight with his wife on winter night and ran out and she got killed by Trollocs because he wasn't there,
sure,
I can see him blaming himself and saying, it's all my fault, I killed her. And, from that point on, they could run with it, and they could kind of be a way to introduce Perrin's inner, God, I got to take responsibility for everything vibe.
Yeah, I mean, I think exactly, not taking a direct translation of this rumor, but kind of just taking some of the pieces of it and saying, could this be applied? Yeah, I like what you just brought up, which was, if they did, maybe even they had, to Tom's point, it's like, okay, but he's an adult and he's married. That kind of changes this idea. But their young love or something, and he just makes some stupid, he walks out on something and somehow it leads to her passing, could certainly build up that kind of belief immediately for the viewers of this tendency we see with Perrin that doesn't have to be an inner dialogue kind of piece. So I love that idea. As far as though, I'm kind of curious, Beth, for Jen just brought this up, the 3 love interests with Rand. Do you see this as a problem for the show? Do you think they're just going to include it straight up as it is? Do you think it's something that's going to change?
Unfortunately, I have a feeling it's going to change. I happen to like it. I think I heard her saying it shows the depth. Each one of them brings something else to Rand. But I don't know. I have a feeling they might be afraid they're just going to turn off a huge amount of their audience with that one. And I have a feeling that one will change. I wish it wouldn't, but I have a feeling it will.
Yeah. No, so I think that's a good one. As I let you go, I think I'll have the panel pick that one up because I think it's an interesting thread to keep on talking about. Before I let you go, Beth, this question that we've kind of tackled here so far, and I probably missed it in chat if you wrote it there. Is there something that the show could do to lose you as a viewer? Is there something where you're just like, this would ruin it for me?
Not much. I mean, if they keep the spirit of it, I realize it's not going to be a word-for-word adaptation of the books. It can't be. The few times the BBC has tried that, and I've tried to watch those shows, they've been horrible, even if it was books I loved.
Yeah.
But they would have to totally change the character of the entire feel of the show for them to lose me completely.
Yeah. Yeah, they would have to completely, and from what we can tell, it doesn't seem like it's going there. So, well, hey, Beth, thank you very much for calling in. Really appreciate you watching and being here today, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Oh, yeah, I'm usually there.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot.
We appreciate it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Beth.
So to that question, and Jen brought this up, and whether or not the production, the crew over there, Rafe, are going to go down this road of the love interest. Joe, what do you think? Is this... I can't remember if this has come up in your discussions in your show. I haven't seen every single one. Is this do you have kind of a strong feeling about what they should do here versus what they will do?
We haven't really talked about this much, but I don't think, I don't know. The only signs we have that they're not doing it is that we don't know who's Elaine or Min. They haven't announced casting for those two characters yet. I don't see why they would cut it. As for like upsetting viewers, by the time that really plays into things is not until book 4. And by that time, I don't think people are going to shut the TV off or stop watching it because of that. So I don't see why they would cut it. Combining characters, I don't like that idea of combining two of those characters together.
Oh yeah.
So
no. Yeah. So my take on this, and I'd like to hear Tom next. I almost think this might be, because you look at Game of Thrones, right? They tackled a lot of taboo, taboo kind of things in culture. It didn't stop the viewership. Now you could make the case that it was just because it was so salacious that people, wanted to watch for that aspect of it. But I kind of wonder if this is something that will actually make it does make the book stand out. And it, as far as, this type of fantasy fiction, and it is one of those things everyone's like, well, this doesn't really kind of work today necessarily, but maybe that's going to be part of why people will watch it. I don't know.
And it's going to say, it's not even like he's with all three of them a lot.
Right.
It's rare. He's rarely with all three of them. I think that I can think of one time off the top of my head specifically, but he's always with one and someone's elsewhere. So it's not like three of them are going to be walking around together all the time.
Right.
They're not going to show, there's not going to be any like menage a trois going on.
Right. Well, as far as we know.
Yeah.
Tom, do you have a strong opinion about this one?
I don't think that they should make the change. I think that I agree with the sentiments of the caller Beth and what Joe said and what Jenna said. I think that it's something that allows this show to stand out. There are a lot of differences from, I guess, typical fantasy worlds. This is one of them. I guess it's not salacious. It's not something where like it's like obviously they're friends. They are all like, it's a consensual four-way relationship, for lack of a better term. So I don't think it's something that they need to cut. And I mean, if you want to talk about salaciousness or whatever, yes, they may lose like the Million Moms view, viewers, but they're gonna get the Sister Wives viewers. They're gonna get like they'll get it back on the back end. And no, but I mean, seriously, I think that making that change because of concern about how it's going to go over morally with people is not a good sign of like the creative team believing in their product, which I don't think, again, I don't think we've seen. Now, if they make that change logistically for whatever reason, they just don't think that the way they're adapting the storyline, they're going to be able to make that work, then that's something that we're going to have to watch and see and make our own judgments. But I don't think making that change because they feel like, hey, that's not going to fly these days. It wasn't going to fly 20 years ago when he started writing the books, It's not something that happens every day that, like, at least in a, that people are like, oh yeah, that's cool now. I think that this is what's happening with him. He's got a lot going on. Give him this. It's okay.
He has a lot going on, so give him a break. I like the idea that they could punt it, right? Certainly the only hint of this we really get is from Min, right? She's like, I thought she said something to him in Berlin or something, or where she mentions this and he's like, what? I don't know what that means. And we're all kind of like, what does that even mean? And so we wait until later, right? They don't have to necessarily make any firm choice. Maybe they care about it from a, what their plans are in the future, but it certainly is something they can punt on, right? And come back to later, like, yeah, this could be interesting. We won't make a firm decision. And that's the nice thing about season 1, even when they go into book 1 and 2, they don't have to, again, like make a firm kind of decision on this piece, which is the probably happy about in the end, which is, let's just see if we can create the audience around this. And if we can, like you said, like you guys have said, I think the audience is going to go with them, right? If they have compelling enough characters and it's a compelling enough story, which we all believe it is, we're sitting here talking about it, that in the end of the day, people are just going to buy into the world and the character. And I think this goes to Joe's point. Maybe, hopefully that says that they did the world building right. They don't have to go around, changing key plots with because they're concerned from a cultural standpoint how it will go over, and I like that aspect. And that's what I'm hopeful for. That's the kind of change that I don't want to see. People get all up in the air about like who they've chosen for certain characters to play those. That doesn't bother me one bit. I think that's just stupid. At the end of the day, it's, can they act? Can they carry the character? And did they write the character well enough that that's the person, that I think fits within Jordan's world? It doesn't have to be exactly my interpretation of it, but that it really fits with, what Jordan was kind of planning for him. So, sorry for having us go down that rabbit hole of Perrin and Rand, but it's fun, right? This is the rabbit hole that you guys are always talking on your show, and that we do too. I did find that funny, going back to the spoilers aspect of the podcast. Did you all make that choice before you did your first podcast, or it was just like after you listened to your first podcast, you're like, yeah, we can't do this without spoiling the entire books? Was that, Jen? Was that like just something that kind of organically happened, or was it before you were like, yeah, we're spoiling everything?
I think we talked about it before, that we were just going to say everything from the books, and
I think,
go ahead.
I think you're right. We did talk. This was like a discussion we had before we started, and I think we said once the episodes come out, we had talked about possibly doing like a non-spoiler, version of like the episode review, and then doing a spoiler version. So that might come out.
Yeah, I don't know what we would talk about if we weren't a spoiler. We wouldn't have. Most of what we've been talking about characters and stuff from the first books, but then we say, well, then later when this happens, so I don't know, it'd be a much shorter show if we didn't.
It's funny because I loved that immediately with what you guys are doing, which was, it almost made me. I'll be honest. I had this moment where I cringed because I was like, oh my gosh, they just said the thing that happens at the very end. I was like, no, what are you doing? And then I'm thinking back to like the shows that I'm doing, and I was like, oh yeah, we told them about this. I mean, you have to and the comfort that you all have, you're just like, yeah, screw it. If you're listening to us, too bad. So there's like, you're like body swap, and and you're like, and they met the 3 Black Aja up, and it's this person, this person, and this person. You didn't know it. Screw you. Too bad. But it's just so matter of fact that I was like, yeah, because if you're listening to this, you should know what's going on. It'd be really tough to do that. It'd be tough to do the show that you're doing and always say, well, what happens when the thing with the person, and they do the, it's a very hard thing to try to pull off.
Yeah, and we're kind of just mimicking our conversations that we normally had about the books. So it's hard to I think if we did spoil it for you, we'd probably mess up so much, and we'd have to probably try recording episodes multiple times.
No, it's true. Cause I've tried. I mean, you've probably heard the show where I think they were in chat. They were talking. Natalia is one of our panelists, one of my good friends, and she'll be like, and she'll have this the way she pitches her voice, like she's trying to communicate to all the panelists. Because I'm trying. There's some times where it's like, okay, we haven't spilled anything into the show, and we're like 30 minutes in, so maybe I'll try. Because there's some big ones, right? Dealing with Varen and some others where you're like, oh, right. That's a really cool thing to find out the first time you read the books, Mm-hmm. And instead it's like, oh, and part of me feels bad, like it's going to be me that breaks the news to them. And then at some point I'm like, you can't control this crap. You just gotta enjoy it. Enjoy talking about it, not worrying too much about it.
The series has been over for how many years now? 8 years now, is it? Or right. So if you haven't read it, but we've given you plenty of time to read all the books. So it's just it's like spoiling a movie that came out 10 years ago. You know.
Yeah, for sure. What were you gonna say, Tom?
No, I was going to say I think 7 years is the cutoff. Right after that, you're allowed to talk about. Honestly, one of the things that we're going to talk about in I think next week's episode, or the one after that, something coming up, is just like how the show is going to address like all of the mysteries that we've as readers have like puzzled out over years and years and years. Like now, all of that stuff is just out on the internet, right? Like all of those mysteries that were such a enticement for readers. Is the show going to do the same thing? Are they going to follow those same mysteries and just hope nobody looks it up? Or are they going to make changes to it, etc.? So,
we're hoping that's a great question. Are there going to be? I mean, I haven't really gone down this road of are there going to be new mysteries that they're going to include and they're going to write into the thing to almost catch us off guard for people that are, it's like because the Red Wedding, right? That was like a famous one for a Game of Thrones. And everyone is freaking out in the world like this. Oh my gosh! And like everyone that read the books was like, yeah, like you could have just read the book and you would have known. Like, but this is the first time you're running into it. So I still think there's going to be that reaction to a lot of things. But I do wonder, right? Will they add things that we're not like expecting, something new? And it's a weird concept to imagine somebody thinking, this is Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time. We should add more plots, more. Like that's just like it sounds crazy, but they absolutely could, and I wouldn't necessarily be against it because let's be honest, once you have 1,400 plots, 1,401 isn't significantly that. It's not like that different. Like in the end, you're like, okay, they didn't need to, and I've seen a lot of people online say this. Where they're like, you don't need to add anything. Because Robert Jordan gave you 2,000 characters, whatever it is, and it's like, and he gave you 753 plots, and you can just pick from those. And I agree, you can, but it also, what matters, like if they add a 2001st character, right? Like in the end, adding a plot to the Wheel of Time and adding a character almost makes sense versus not adding something new. And maybe now, Tom, you have me like hoping that they do because that would make it. I don't know, that almost makes it kind of like more exciting to watch the episodes because it's like, what little twist might they add that makes it? I don't know. I'm a speculative kind of, obviously I love this stuff, so it's like, oh man, I could get into writing new theories for the TV show.
That's right. Or even if they said something like, okay, 3 big mysteries, right? Who is the Mandred? Who killed Asmodean? Whatever you want to say, and like we're gonna change the answer to one of them.
Right.
They won't tell you who, they won't tell you what. You're not going to find out till much later. But that gives all of us who are like into that, when we're reading the books, like, oh, let's go back. Let's look at the differences between the show and the books. What is this? What is that? And I think that might be something fun that they could do that would keep readers interested and would stop that ability to have those things spoiled. Because I think with Game of Thrones, like the books aren't done yet. Right, so that mysteries, like the John's parentage or whatever it is, even though like people were pretty sure about it, it hasn't been expressly said. So like that was still a payoff for the two. But like all of those things, all of those big mysteries have that payoff in these books. So to be able to add something new, like or to change something and not tell us what that is, that gives the readers that extra bit in their teeth.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, if you're still watching with us right now, I'm speaking with Takaran Riyadh, Joe, Jen, and Tom. Go check out the website where they can download their podcast. I think they're all over the place. I don't think we have to like name every place you can get their podcast. Just Google them. They're a lot of fun. They cover the show and then they also cover the books. Like it's not just exclusive to the show. And there's something that you guys do that I really love. And so by the way, if you're watching this, subscribe with us. And come back next week. It's a lot of fun talking with Wheel of Time content creators and talking about the Wheel of Time. One thing you three do recently that I've heard, and maybe it's just dealing with the episodes, but I love it. And it makes me like I can't listen to it while I'm doing work, is what I've noticed, because you're doing a synopsis of where you think the episodes will go, and you read it out, and it's like I'm like, first of all, I'm like, wait, it sounds like they're reading like a summary of the books. Like, did they write these summaries beforehand? And all of a sudden, my brain's like, you're trying to design some graphic, and you just missed what Jen just said her synopsis was. No, I because we've done, like, we're going through the books the way we do in the live adaptation, and we're like covering it chapter by chapter and saying who we'd cut and kill. But I love the way that you three are putting together these synopses and then talking about them. Who came up with that idea? Did it just organically happen, Jen? Or did one of you say, like, we should write, like, how we think this is going to happen and then do a show about it.
I think I said it on one of the episodes a couple episodes ago. And then, but it's funny because we all did kind of different things. I wrote it as if it was like, I was like summarizing the show on a website. Like I literally wrote out everything that happened. Tom and Joe kind of did it with like bullet points, you know, kind of describing. So we all kind of did it like a little bit different, but it's definitely been fun to kind of like try to fit all of this stuff in. And there's stuff we miss, stuff I just know that's absolutely wrong, but it's fun to do it.
No, but it's really unique. It's you just, you know, the ladies from White Tower podcast, they do a synapses, you know, but it's more like it's really hilarious, and it's just, it's one of those you just think, you hear it, you're like, what was that? That's amazing. But from like, it's from like for a chapter, and so I really liked that you've extrapolated this, you know, concept of covering this, and you have the three of you, and you're taking this approach of like, okay, if I was going to do it, how could I summarize it, and then you talk about it. It's really fascinating. If you, for those of you that are watching, you know, that they've done it in the last couple of episodes, they have there, and it's just a lot of fun. Like, it makes me, if this makes sense, I listen to it and I want to write my own. Right? I'm like, you should absolutely ask people, like, okay, you've heard ours, like record yours and send it to us or something, you know, and we'll include it in the show or something like that. You know, like, it's a fun way to do it. Like, go ahead, Joe.
It was tough too. I did mine 3 times. I changed it. I kept changing it because at first I was like, because I wasn't sure where they're ending. I have no idea where they're going to end the season at. We know, I mean, we're pretty sure that they're going into the Great Hunt. How far, I don't know. So it was really tough. I know at one point I just did the Eye of the World. Then I was like, I'm going to put the whole Great Hunt in there. Then I like kind of put part of the Great Hunt in there. It was like driving me nuts.
It is. It's a fun exercise to kind of say, okay, well, what do we know? What do we assume we know? And what do we think must happen, or we'll be upset, or whatever the case may be? And how do you fit those things into 8 roughly hour-long episodes, right? Which is what we think, you know, the timeline of the show is going to be. So, Matt, I definitely think you should try. If you want, we will definitely, if you want to record something, we will definitely play it and say how much better yours is than what ours was. But yeah, I think that for anyone listening, I think it's a fun thing to do, especially for people who are concerned about, like, how are they going to do this? What characters may they cut? I hope they don't want to do this. Trying to figure that out, like put those puzzle pieces together and make it fit into what you think an episode of a show could present. It's an interesting blacksmith's puzzle.
It's therapeutic too.
Go ahead,
I think like we're kind of judging them for, oh my God, they're gonna put the Great Hunt in, this isn't gonna fit. But then when you sit down and try to plot it out and actually try to get it to fit into an hour, it's really hard. And I think my 4th episode was probably like 2 hours long. So
I do remember
going and going and going. And I'm like, wait, I have no idea how much stuff can happen in an hour. So it's definitely like, I give them a lot of credit. It's hard to fit like to figure out how to fit it in. And
I'm just waiting to hear someone who's just like, sorry, go ahead, Joe.
No, I was just saying I don't envy the writers, but I kind of do, in the fact that I wish I was writing there. But it's a tough job to try to adapt something, especially, I mean, just adapting a normal book into a movie is tough, and they're going to try to adapt a 14-book series into a TV show. That's rough.
Well, that was the fun part. I imagine if you got submissions, there'd be a lot of people that were like, so the books would start in Emmons Field, right? They would just like give you a summary of the entire books. Like, I don't want to change it. It should just happen the way it happened. But it is like a cathartic exercise, probably, because you're like, wait. And then you actually have to stay consistent, which is really funny for the three of you as you're going through it, because you're like, wait a second, in the last one you said we were cutting him or whatever. You know, you're running into the same problems, like where I think in our live adaptation episodes we did on the Dusty Wheel was I had to retcon some things. Every once in a while I was like, wait a second, Todd isn't here. I hated Todd's decision. You know, okay, does everyone on the panel agree to bring this person back to life we just transmigrated him from the last episode to today's episode. He's back in, you know. Because it's really tough. Like you think to yourself, okay, so we can leave this out, but then later on you're like, oh well, okay, so I kind of need some of this built in. Mm-hmm. And so I guess the exciting part for me is that it does seem like so far what we've learned about they've included, so far it doesn't seem like there's been anything like crazy. right? Like it's just like, okay, they're adapting it. Maybe they're not. We don't know all the places they're going to stop. We don't know all the people that are going to be in it yet. We haven't heard episode 3 and 4, table read, so we don't really know what was included there. But it seems like they're making some additions, making some subtractions maybe, but they're not overall kind of changing it too much, at least what we've seen so far. Like I haven't seen anything where I'm like, okay, like they just got rid of a whole, like, we talk about getting rid of the Ogier, like, oh, Loyal's just gone, but no, he was cast, right? So, okay. And we think we have the Tinkers, and it looks like we have the White Cloaks, and it looks like, it's like all these core groups. And so they're not like going through with like a hacksaw and just like, no, we're not touching this. And it seems like it's more of like a fine-tooth comb that we can tell, right? Yeah. So far, at least.
Right. It's probably gonna change as the series goes on too, because that's what always happens. Whenever they come out with like a series or a trilogy of movies, they usually try to stick very close to the material in like the first season or two or the first movie. And then like all hell breaks loose as it goes on. So once you start, because it's like a Jenga puzzle, right? Once you start pulling out pieces, by the time you get to the end, it's going to collapse. So, and then they have to start like trying to fit things in there to have it make sense.
I am hopeful that they go multiple seasons, because I'm hopeful that we'll be back together on another episode like this in like a year or a year from now or whatever, and be like, oh my gosh, what are they going to do with season 2? And they took out this Jenga piece. What does this mean for like everything else is going to fall? And it's like, no, they can support it with this or whatever. I'm looking forward to those those kind of chats because obviously we're doing all this stuff. We love talking about the books, and it would just be nice to have another decade of the Wheel of Time, right? Like the end, in my head, I'm just like the 2020s are just going to be another Wheel of Time decade. My wife isn't necessarily as excited about this idea as I am, but she's totally game, and she's totally supportive. But it's like another decade of like just speculation about this fantasy world. Maybe wasn't on her roadmap for life, but again, it's like one of those was like, but that would be such a cool thing to have, and for us to keep on being able to do this kind of content, and year over year be able to talk about how these changes are going to change everything else. So I love that question. And by the way, Joe, I want to give you props. I think in one of your earlier episodes, you were like, Tam is totally going to be a big name actor. They're gonna cast someone as him because he's in a few scenes, and they're gonna want somebody to come in, and they did just that, right? So I wanted to call you out for that because we're gonna go back through all of our episodes, right? And I'm gonna go back, and we're gonna be like, oh my gosh, that's embarrassing.
I have all of our like picks for characters and things. I have it all documented, so we're gonna go back and see how bad.
No, I'm burning that stuff.
That'll be the fun stuff. It's like I got this right, and you're gonna need people to like fact check you. We're gonna be like fact checking the content creators about what they actually got right and what they didn't. It's like we have missing episodes. Where's episode 103? Of your show. When it comes to when you tell people about your show, Tom, like how do you explain it? Like why should people come and listen to Talk of Ron Riyadh?
So I mean, for one, I do tell people it's a spoilers podcast. So either you have to be a fan of the books or you have to be a fan of being spoiled on things. But I think that I try to say it's a very casual, friendly conversation that we want you to just feel like you're listening to your three friends talking about something. So and that's, I guess, some of the feedback that I've gotten so far is that that's the vibe that we're setting out. So that's a success. I mean, we are not people that are going to get, I mean, we try to get things right, but we're not going to be sticklers to details. We're going to be talking more about like the bigger ideas of things and what the concepts of the show are. And we try and do very pinpointed topics of conversation. So we're going to talk about a particular character or a particular theme of the show or a particular like the magic system or Teleran Riyadh or whatever the case may be. So even if you don't want to listen to everything, we might have something that you might find interesting.
I appreciate that, because I think it does feel like a casual conversation between friends. You can tell that you were friends, and I love that aspect of it, that you're just, you get each other, there's inside jokes, and as a viewer or as a listener, you kind of like, oh, I want to understand what they're saying when they mention this aspect of it. And for those of you that haven't tried it out, if you really want to hear all the news in a podcast form about the show, all the speculation, rumors, that you can talk about, definitely pick up the podcast, listen to it. It's a lot of fun. And I know these three are really great about answering, tweets and bringing those things into the show. So if if you're a new viewer or listener and you want to go out and get involved in the show, you certainly can. It was a lot of fun to make a comment and hear that comment show up on the show. That was cool. And so, yeah, please check out Takaran Riyadh, the Showcast, the Wheel of Time Showcast. You guys are on Facebook, Twitter, you're on Instagram. Is there any place I'm missing? Where else can they find you?
That's where they can find. Oh, they can jump in our. You can jump in our Discord channel. I finally got that thing opened and running. So it's
great. Okay.
Yeah, it's in our show notes. So if you check out any of the episodes, actually, it's only in like the last 2 episodes show notes. But
okay. Yeah, awesome. I will put that link also in the description. I think I put a bunch of links in the description of the video where you can find them, and you can find them in a Discord too. After the show, we typically jump in. If you're still watching, you can go to our live show channel. We jump in there, and I'll jump in there shortly and just kind of talk through any questions that you had in chat that you didn't get covered, or there was something you want to call about and you weren't able to. We like to go over there and just kind of have a post-show, breakdown of what we've already discussed. Thank you to the three of you. I really appreciate you showing up today, taking your Sunday and talking about the Wheel of Time with me and just kind of geeking out. So I really appreciate that a lot.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
It was great.
No, and I'm looking forward to, again, we'll do this before next year, again, I'm sure. So for those of you that are watching, thanks for sticking around at the Dusty Wheel. We'll be back on Wednesday with our live show. We have a lot of fun guests coming up in the next month. Can't wait to kind of make some of these announcements at the end of next week. So yeah, be looking for those. Follow us, subscribe, hit the notification, whatever you're supposed to say at the end of these kind of things. We'd love to have you as a viewer. And so I guess it's not good night now, is it? It's good evening from the Dusty Wheel. And as we like to say around here, smash to black.
If you want news and